presenter, Jessica Delohery, who is a consultant with Giant Squid Consulting Group. Take it away, Jessica.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Emma, for the introduction. I am going to start by telling everybody a little bit about myself. I started my nonprofit career as an AmeriCorps Vista member, and a lot of the couple organizations that I've worked with, I have mostly focused on project coordination and program implementation. So I got an opportunity to start a fundraising role, and I was excited to kind of learn some new skills, but I was really nervous naturally to kind of ask people for money and kind of learn this whole new world. So I just want to say that it was definitely nerve-wracking for me, but when I realized that a lot of fundraising has to do with research and planning, it made me feel more comfortable because I could really prepare and do my homework about what funders were all about and kind of think about what my program is really doing and the impact that it's having. So that's a little bit about me. I'm going to skip ahead on my presentation here. We've covered logistics. Thank you, Emma. I'm going to go back to this previous screen. So I'm just going to position the webinar a little bit for everybody. So what we're going to really talk about today is helping you to find and assess grant opportunities that are the right fit for your program or your organization as a whole, so that you can effectively implement the project that you're trying to do with students and even grow your grant funding. So we're really focusing on finding those grants for you. What you are like basically this webinar is for you if you're trying to submit successful grants and finding opportunities that are the right fit and saving your time and resources, which we know is extremely valuable in our work. So thinking about what you're gonna see at the end of this webinar, you're basically gonna have a very clear process for how to search for the right opportunities and be confident in speaking with foundation staff members about grant opportunities and then submitting an actual proposal that's going to get funded. So that is what we're focusing on, is this clear process to really help you do your research and write the grant. So I'm really excited to be working with communities and schools to be offering this class today. I'm going to share as much as I can over the next hour, but as Emma mentioned, we are going to do a follow-up Q&A session on May 8th at 1 o'clock. So this will give us some extra time to really cover some of your questions about this content and also, you know, as it relates to your program. So without further ado, I'm going to talk about three main things today. So one, where to find grants. I'm going to give you some sources that you can check out and do some searching. And then the majority of our time today, we're going to be talking about how to determine which grants are a good fit for you. And I just want to mention that in my experience, about 75 to 80% of your time on a grant is actually the research process. So all of what we're talking about today is the majority of a grant proposal preparation. And the remaining time is when you actually write and edit the content. So just remember that this is really the meat of what a grant proposal process is. So we are going to use a case study example today to actually guide the process of how to do this and how to dive in to the research. And I also want to mention that we're going to follow up with, after this case study example, we're going to really talk about how, whether or not you're ready to submit a grant. So we'll use the case study, but we're going to talk about how to really think through pursuing an opportunity. And I do want to thank people for submitting questions in a pre-survey. I was able to glance through those, and there were some really key questions about writing tips. And so we are going to kind of close out the presentation with some tips about how to use, translate all of what we're talking about today into the actual content. So we'll go over writing tips towards the end of the presentation. And another thing that I do want to focus on is today we're focusing on private foundation funding. So there are corporate funding opportunities, which are pretty similar to what the process that we're going to see today. And then there's government grant funding as well, which is a whole nother conversation. So if those are the things that are on your mind, keep track of those questions. And if we can't get to them today, we can talk a little bit about them on May 8th, or we can talk individually because they're just a bit different process. So focusing on foundation funding. So I'm going to move on to showing you where to find grants. So I have a list of sources here, and some of them may be really familiar to you. And one of the things that I want to stress is that these are awesome sources, but what is the most important is knowing what to search for. So that's why we're going to use a case study example, and I'm going to show you kind of tips and tricks as to guide your research. So I want to point out here, we've got some school project specific sources. So these are really good for teachers searching for opportunities to implement programs in their classroom or in the school. And then the grant directory and database that I have listed here is called Foundation Directory Online. So it's foundationcenter.org. This is actually a paid resource, and I have used my Sherlock Holmes hat to kind of learn more about what our opportunities are right now. And actually, right now during the COVID-19 pandemic, the agency has provided free access to everyone to this database. So one of the key things that I would like all of you to take away today is that this link here on the presentation, which you will get at the end of this webinar, is free to you at the moment. And so I encourage you to do some searching through that database because it is typically a paid source. Now, some of you might be thinking about whether or not it's actually worth your money and resources to join some paid resources. There are quite a few paid search directories out there, and I will say that you really got to think about where you are in your grants program to determine whether or not it's the right time for you right now. So if you are just starting to search for grants, I would say that you should utilize the free sources available to you. If you're really looking to kind of ramp up your grant funding, then it may be worth your resources to join on with an account. And just keep in mind too that you need to make sure that you actually have the time to take advantage of a membership if you're going to actually pay for that. So that is my recommendation, is to really think about where you are in your grant search. So pointing out to company websites are also a really great source for them to share their community giving opportunities, and newsletters. I have 2 newsletters listed here that are really great sources. They are nationwide, so take a look at these, but as you start to get into a routine of searching for grants, there are also newsletter opportunities through local universities in Chicago and agencies, community foundations, and actually Forefront is an organization that supports nonprofits that has a newsletter that's a good opportunity here in Chicago. So we're going to talk about what to search for. I kind of mentioned that that's really important as you're kind of looking through these lists of funders. So these are the three topics that you're going to be searching for. It's what the funders typically categorize, and it's how you should think of your work too, how you talk about your work. So location, where you are making an impact. Focus area, how you are making an impact, and then target population, who you are impacting. So I want everybody to really think hard about their work, their specific programs, your organization as a whole, and think about these three areas and really just try to help yourself identify those keywords in order to, one, search for grant opportunities for what you are needing funding for, but also to help you prepare for conversations with funders about your work. So your mission statement is, of course, your guide. It may not necessarily say exactly where you are making an impact here in Chicago. There's 77 neighborhoods, and so you may have programming that targets different neighborhoods. So really make sure you're thinking about what you need funding for, and then these three target areas, because that's how you're going to search and then thus write the grant and communicate to funders about your work. So I'm going to give a couple of examples to talk about that. So thinking about location, say you're a theater company that provides performing arts education workshops in your space, but you're wanting to expand this program to actually provide it to neighborhood schools. So you're going to be looking, as you're looking for foundation funding to help you expand this program, you're going to be wanting to make sure that that foundation is interested in the geographic area that you want to provide this program. Perhaps that program is actually in the neighborhood next door to you, to where your physical space is. So really making sure you identify saying, my organization provides programming in this area, but this program is impacting this neighborhood. So that's how we kind of think through location, and making sure that you can speak about that and write about that clearly in a grant proposal. So thinking about location again, if you're an agency that works in targeted Chicago neighborhoods, and for example, teaching about healthy relationships and mental health awareness. So you're working with schools across or in very targeted neighborhoods, but you understand that there's really a need for a hotline for families. So if you want to find funding to launch this hotline program, you are going to want to really make sure you communicate that your programming is in the certain areas, but that this hotline program is actually going to serve a much larger geographic area, maybe the entire city of Chicago and maybe the entire northern half of Illinois. So thinking about location, it actually, where you, your main mission and your overall programming may actually be a different location than the specific program that you're trying to fund. So thinking about focus area, I'm going to give a couple of examples again, just to kind of help us think through this topic. So say you're an arts organization that provides one-time programming or short-term programming for a large number of students in a school or schools. But you also have a smaller program that impacts a fewer number of students, but it impacts them for a longer period of time. It's a year-long program where you're working intensely with a teacher and the classroom. You're going to want to make sure that you can communicate that focus area for where you're trying to find funding for say we're trying to find funding for this long-term program. You're going to want to make sure that the funder actually cares about your work as a capacity building tool for teachers and the classroom, and that you may be asking for a $7,000 grant and it's impacting one classroom, but the impact is so great, and here is why. So thinking about focus area, you're going to want to make sure that you can differentiate between what your organization does and the program you're looking for funding. And an example to think about: target population. So if you're an agency that provides health education and service connection to families without access to health care, and you find that nearly all of those families are living in low-income households, then you're really going to want to communicate that your target population is economically disadvantaged families without access to health care. And so as you're searching for funding, you're going to want to look for those key terms that really align with the program that you're trying to fund. So I am going to take a pause here also to mention that as you are thinking, as we're going through this presentation, if anyone has questions, you can type them in the chat box, so I can answer them along the way or at the end. So we've talked a lot about how to think through these areas, and now we're actually going to dive into kind of the case study example. Okay, so here's our case study. And as I kind of mentioned in the beginning, we're going to use this to actually guide the research process. So this is the hypothetical nonprofit organization that we're talking about today. So we are a nonprofit dance studio in Chicago's Gage Park neighborhood. And at our space, we provide a variety of youth and adult dance classes. And so we serve kids and adults through beginner and intermediate dance classes and workshops. And what we're trying to find funding for is a new program that engages the CPS elementary school teachers and students in our neighborhood by integrating dance into the classroom. So really we're talking about integrating dance into, the math classroom specifically. So that's our new goal for this program, brand new program. So we are going to try and find some funding, and we're going to use a process. Now I'm going to dive right into the actual process that I keep talking about. So this is what I want you to use as your guide. So starting with the sources where you can find grants, you're going to want to use key terms on your location, focus area, and target population to actually get a decent list of funders. And then that's just the beginning, because you really want to then dive into individual funders to view all the information that you can that they have available on the internet. So you're going to be looking at their website. That will often tell you what their priorities are. And you're going to I have a question list as well to help guide you in thinking about understanding their specific priorities. You're also going to try to access what their most recent grants have been. So we're going to look at their 990 tax form, and that's going to show us who they've given to recently. Sometimes it'll actually give the actual program name or topic, and also the amount that they have given to this program. So we're going to take that information too, and what we're looking for is, again, alignment. We want to understand the funder's priorities and make sure that it aligns with our work. What I want to stress right now is that in my conversations with funders, they have said that every cycle that they review proposals, there are quite a few submissions that really do not align with their work. So that's why this is incredibly important, because you want to make sure that you are spending your time to crafting a grant proposal that is that has a likelihood of getting funding. So if I have heard over and over again from funders that people submit grants that just don't make sense, then I want you guys to take that cue and say, okay, I need to make sure I'm doing my research and doing my planning to make sure I'm submitting for a fruitful opportunity. On that note too, I think the percentage of grant submissions is about 17% success rate. So when you're first starting to submit grants, you should see maybe a 1 in 4 yes for your grants submitted. So what I'm trying to help you with today is making sure that you're more at the 35-45% success range, because you want to make sure you're spending your time wisely and applying to funders that are interested in your work. So that is where we're at today. And just to go back to this research process, the last thing that you're going to want to look at to help you assess whether or not a grant is the right fit for you is the actual grant application questions and requirements. So you want to make sure that you have all of the information, meaning the program content. If it's a new program, you need to make sure that you have all of the plans laid out. You also want to make sure that you have the right organization documents that are required by the funder. So that's pretty important as well. As anything that the funder is asking for, you want to make sure that you're submitting that information. So if you are not able to get all of that information together before the deadline, then you need to set this opportunity aside and plan to submit the next time that they have a cycle. So again, research and planning is a majority of your time preparing for a grant submission. So we're going to go through this process together using the case study. And before we dive in, here's those questions that I mentioned that will help you guide your research. So you're really trying to make sure you understand the focus of the foundation's giving, where they're funding, what they're funding. I'll give you a little tidbit. Sometimes what they actually say on their website doesn't match what's on their 990 form. So they may say they're giving in a certain area, but when you're looking at what they've given to, sometimes it doesn't match. So you're like, it is clear now that they aren't really prioritizing this, at least right now. So that's why the whole research process is important. So you're wanting to make sure that you understand the target population that they're trying to impact, and that you understand what they have given to most recently. And if you take nothing else away from this presentation, I want you to know that it is important to reach out to the funder. So once you've done all of your research and you understand where the funder's at, you can articulate where you are at and where your program is at, you want to reach out to them with questions. They should be thoughtful. They're going to know if you've done your research about them. So you're going to want to engage them to actually see, do we have alignment here? Is this worth my time to submit this grant proposal? So I will say that a lot of great conversations have come from reaching out in advance of a deadline to make sure you're engaging with the foundation staff. So please take that tip with you today. And I am going to transition to the internet because we're going to use the case study to Yes,
Before you get going, can I just jump in and say there's
yes.
been a request from the chat to use the term specific population instead of target population,
Okay.
as it targeted has some loaded language behind it, especially when thinking about the people, want to make sure that
Survey.
we're not lumping any groups of people together. And then there also has been a question of if an org's website and 990 don't match, should you go with what the 990 says or what the website says?
Personally, I would go with the 990.
Great, thank you.
And to add to that, yeah, I would go with the 990 and then also compare that to what their actual grant questions are. Because that can also kind of give you insight into what they're looking for from you to communicate. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for the questions. So we are going to dive into the internet. Just a reminder about the case study. So we are seeking funding to integrate dance into the math classroom. So I am going to go to the internet. Please let me know if this times out. Can we still see my, my screen here?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I'm going to stop my video so we can focus on the screen. This is the foundation directory online. So this is the database that I had referenced in the beginning. We're going to use this to do our initial search. I'm going to go with advanced search filters. Here. Okay, so we've got subject area, which is again that focus area, geographic focus, population. So these are the things that we are going to want to use in our search. You can see they have quite a few options here. And I'm going to just start searching here for kind of a general arts education. See where this is at. Thought I just saw this arts education. Okay, I'm going to use the check boxes instead. Okay, oh, here we go. So we're going to focus on arts education. I want to focus, see if there's something for, performing arts. There's performing arts, but I want to look to see if there's performing arts education here. I'll try and type that in. I'm going to go with performing arts here, and I'll just switch over to geographic focus at the moment. We'll talk about Chicago and population, age groups. Okay. Okay, just look at some of these options here. And I'm going to check this box here. So I am going to start with searching these terms, and that should give me quite a big list actually. So let's see what that results in. Okay, we're looking at about 1,200 funders, which is quite a few. I am going to glance at all of them here. And okay, I'm seeing some pretty big names, pretty big foundations. Actually, some of them are outside of Chicago. So I am going to narrow this search down a bit to just focus on Chicago foundations. So I can do that right here. Typing in Chicago. Okay, looks like, okay, we have a smaller list here, so still a good size list, but focused on simply Chicago-based foundations. So I'm going to just kind of name what these categories are to glance at. There's a grant maker name. We have the location of the grant maker, their total assets compared to their total giving, and then their grant count. And this grant count should be what is on their most recent 990 form, so the amount of grants that they have given in their most recent filing year. I want to mention too that as you're looking at 990s, the year is often like 2 or 3 years prior due to the way it's published. So I'm going to go with searching by grant count. So some of these foundations, these are really large foundations, and in order to find like a starting place, I'm actually going to go to kind of this more smaller pool, I would say smaller range, the amount of grants that have been given most recently. So I have actually heard of this foundation here, Brinson Foundation. I'm going to take a quick look at them. It looks like their top subject areas here are education, science, and arts and culture. So that actually seems like it might be a good opportunity for this program. And if I go down and I see their list here of subject areas, education services, and performing arts. Okay, great. Youth development. These are all very good signs that I'm seeing about this funder for this program. So there's quite a bit of information, as you can see, on these database searches. And as I kind of mentioned in our research process, really they're going to point you right to their website. So I'm going to go to this website of the the funder's website, and take a quick look and see. Okay, so right away, I see 2018 grants and okay, who we are. This is where I want to be initially. They have priorities here, and I see education and scientific research. So I'm going to see what they have listed for education. And it looks like, okay, education is essential. Okay, I'm scanning down. Okay, they have 5 focus areas for their giving. And I am seeing that they do prioritize math, so that's relevant to the program we're trying to fund, but they are really not prioritizing art. So I am thinking that this actually might not be a good match for us. This may be with further research. I might want to develop some questions and reach out to the funder to see if they would be interested with their STEM focus. But I'm actually going to go back to my search and see if I can find a different funder that has a little bit closer alignment with the program that I'm trying to fund. So I am going to go back here and, okay, I am going to look at the Field Foundation. So they do have a focus area of human services and arts and culture. So this is looking like it might be promising for our search. So I'm going to take a look at their profile here. And again, they have so much information, which is really helpful as you're trying to hone in on what their priorities are, and look at all of these subjects. Well, this is a good list of what they're interested in, so that that's a good sign. And I am seeing arts and culture, arts services, education. Oh, I wonder, they do have performing arts specifically, so that these are very good signs for me to continue moving on. And I am going to see what they say about the actual application. Looks like they give some information here about what they're requesting. And I'm going to see here they have a couple of deadlines throughout the year, which is really helpful to know too. So I think that this funder actually might be a good prospect. So I'm going to go to their website. Okay, here's the Field Foundation. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go to their grant making section. Their websites. Okay, that just gives some general info. I'm going to go to program areas. So it looks like they have 4 main areas. I'm going to take a look at the art section. Okay, so this first bullet point tells me that they are interested in community-based art organizations, which is me, and located within the heat map. So that tells me that they have a very targeted focus about where they want to give. And I'll see if they have that information. Yeah, it looks like it's right here. So geographic priorities. They're going to, they give a map right here. So they are telling you exactly where they are wanting to provide grants. So you're going to want to assess this and compare it to what where your program is being implemented. So I'm going to go back to the art program, and it looks like they support arts. They don't call out arts education specifically, but I'm gonna check their 990 to see what kind of recent programs they have funded, to see if any kind of look similar to what I'm looking to fund. So I have a PDF of their 990 form already up on my page. I will tell you that you can search for these on the internet. The Foundation Directory Online database that we were just in actually allows you to download these forms, but you can also find them on GuideStar. GuideStar is kind of the key place that I recommend for you. And you'll see, as I mentioned, it's a couple of years old, which typically shouldn't matter because the grant giving usually doesn't change too much unless they have reassessed their own priorities. And in that case, they have typically shared that with you on their website. So as I'm scanning through, it looks like they even have their grant questions in this 990, which I don't see very often actually, but this is very helpful to have that right here. So I'm going to scan down to the very bottom of this document because that is where the grant giving information is typically located. So, okay, looks like we are right here. Now, for each 990, it looks a little bit different. So you will often see the organization name and the grant amount. I want to mention this is incredibly small text, so I'm going to speak about the things that I am seeing, even though you might not be able to read it specifically. So this 990 has the organization name, They also have the project name that they have funded, which is helpful, and then the amount of the grant. So as I'm scanning through this 990 form, I'm looking for a couple of things. I'm looking for organizations that may provide sort of similar work to what I am providing or trying to find funding for. And then likewise with the project name, I'm trying to look for projects that sound similar to what I am trying to request funding for. And once I find those on this list, then I'm going to be looking for the amount that has been granted to these organizations, because that will help to guide me in knowing about how much they would typically fund for a project like mine. So I'm looking to integrate integrate dance specifically into the math classroom. So thinking about that, I am going to scan this list for performing arts opportunities or projects and education projects. I'm going to call out right here that this project specifically says third year renewal. So that is a hint to me that this funder actually provides continued funding for projects. So that is something that I'm going to want to note to myself about this funder as I continue my research. So I am going to keep going down this list. And it's a pretty healthy list, which is really good to see. It looks like the grants range from even $1,500 all the way through $30,000 or more. Okay, I'm gonna pause right here. It looks like this project right here at the top of this page is called Out of School Dance Education Program. And they provided a $30,000 grant to this project. So that is some information that I'm gonna wanna note as I am continuing to research. Okay, here's another program too. It's called Empowering Youth Through Socially Engaged Art. And that was a $15,000 grant here. So that information is pretty noteworthy to me. And again, based on this range, it looks like they are giving really relative to probably what the project needs are when I see a range like that. So I want to get back to my presentation to kind of talk through the conclusion of this case study, but I would say that this is actually a very fruitful opportunity for the program we're trying to fund.
Jessica, can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Someone in the comments said, could we tie health of active motion, especially in school-aged children, if we were doing this dance program? Would that be an angle that we could use when looking for potential funders?
Physical health?
Yeah, health is getting the students up and moving. Could we use that angle when looking for funders who might be open to the project that we're proposing?
Absolutely, absolutely. So what I would recommend then is using that key term in your initial search. So you may be finding foundations that are prioritizing physical health, and you're going to really want to plan your communication strategy to articulate how implementing art into the math classroom is not only, helping their math skills, but it's getting them up and moving, which is what the funder cares about. So you're going to want to, I would say yes, and you just want to make sure you have a communication plan.
Great. And then one more question, is it acceptable to reach out to some of the other people who have received grants from a funder to ask tips or advice?
I mean, I would say yes. I would say yes. I think it's acceptable. Um, and I think it just depends on the person you're talking to about whether or not you're going to get the information you're looking for, if that makes sense. And I would just say be cognizant of a person's time, just like a funder. You're going to want to have very clear questions for that person to make the conversation be productive and quick.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for the questions. Okay, I'm going to kind of talk through, are we ready to submit this grant? So we have kind of from our research, we understand that the Field Foundation of Illinois does prioritize our location. This case study specifically targeted or identified Gage Park as our location and where we are implementing our program. And so there was alignment there. Focus area, they support arts. And so we are in alignment there. We just have to make sure that we're articulating appropriately about what the purpose of our arts programming is. And then our population that we're working with is again, and actually I didn't see specifically their interest in population served. I think they really have that geographic focus, but upon further research, we just want to make sure that we are in alignment there. And based on the 990, looking at the different projects, you're going to want to look for similar grant amounts. And what I would say is, if this program that we're trying to implement is going to take $10,000 to launch, then that is what we're going to ask for. And we're going to also want to make sure that we know exactly where that money is going to be spent. And so with all of that information, you're going to want to note outstanding questions because, again, I'm going to emphasize that you should reach out to the funder to have these conversations. And so make sure that, your project is really of interest to them. Some outstanding questions that I would really focus on for this example would be, are they willing to fund a brand new program? And if so, what are they going to want to see from us about our research and plans for this program? So are they going to want to see the kind of data that tells us that this program is going to have a certain type of impact for the students? So those are the kind of questions that I would focus on if I were going to reach out to the funder before actually writing the grant proposal. So I would say yes, Field Foundation would be a go for this example, given that we can get in contact with the funder and ask these questions well in advance of the next proposal deadline. I'm going to summarize kind of what we talked about today. So any of the search sites that that I provided you today, or that you find yourself online, you're really going to want to make sure that you can identify what your location, focus area, and population served is, and does it align with the funder. You're going to want to make sure that you're reviewing the funder's information in order to answer questions on whether or not it's in alignment and whether or not it's a good fit for your program. And lastly, do you have the resources and capacity to actually complete this grant application prior to the deadline? That's pretty key too. You want to make sure that you are putting your best foot forward because they're asking for a narrative description of your project, as well as some documents, organizational documents, and they're going to be looking at your budget just as closely as your narrative. So you want to make sure that you have the ability to present that information in the way that you want it to be seen. I do want to dive into some writing tips, unless we have any specific questions from Emma right now.
Yes, there was a question of, do you have any tips on how to organize the information from searches? It can feel, I think, really overwhelming to see, over 1,000 possible options. So do you have any tips on keeping track of funders once you've reviewed, once you've applied for, any tips around that?
Yes, my tip would be to pick a method that works for you. For me, it would actually be an Excel document to track the funders and some keynotes. It may be a notebook for you. It may be a Word doc. You may have a project-based program, like an online dashboard that you use to help your keep yourself organized. Whatever your method is, just stick with it and make sure that you are constantly glancing at those notes and noting the deadlines of the funders that you think are worth your time.
Great. And I think this is kind of a similar question, so I'll add it and then I'll let you continue. I know questions are still appearing in the chat and we'll try to get what we can. How do you track grant application metrics, like prospecting hours and alignment decision making, whether to postpone, revisit next year, all that kind of stuff? Do you use a spread, like an Excel spreadsheet, to do that as well?
To assess whether or not to assess whether or not the funder is a good fit for the program I'm looking for?
To track the grant application metrics. So kind of what went into making a grant happen.
Oh, I see. So you described your program. You said we are tracking results based on these metrics, and you want to keep track of them for reporting purposes. I'm so sorry.
I will ask the person who asked this question to maybe clarify the question in the comment, and we can come back to it.
Yeah, I would say, again, yeah, for if we're looking at tracking kind of what you have expressed to this funder or written to this funder, I would say keep it in the same Excel doc that you are tracking for your donors or your funders, and have a confirmed funder list.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm going to expand a little bit on data here too, which might help to answer some of those questions. So one thing that I want to start with for proposal success is really, I know this sounds like a no-brainer, but answering the question that is in the grant proposal. I really recommend to keep it simple, write in a simple way, and be clear and concise so that, for example, your cousin who has no idea what you do can read it and understand what you're trying to do. And along with that, I don't recommend copying and pasting the information that you just submitted for your most recent grant. You really are going to want to tailor your writing to match what the funder's priorities are. So not that you're changing your program, but that you want to talk about your program in a very specific way based on what the funder is interested in. Thinking about project objectives and data. So I just want to give a tip about thinking about outputs versus outcomes. So you want to really think about not overhauling the way you collect data at all, but just trying to think about what data are you collecting and how can you say the output number, which is kind of like the number of students that you're trying to impact, and then also the outcomes that you expect, which are think about them as like percentages. So you are impacting X number of students, and by the end of the program, you expect that, X percent of students will increase their attendance to this class or this project. So that is kind of a tip that I have for objectives and data. And along with my kind of big tip here, talk with the funder about what you are tracking and what is it that they're specifically interested in, because you may find that what you are already doing is what they want to see. You just haven't exactly expressed that in a proposal to them. So keep that in mind. There was another pre-webinar question about collaboration with organizations. And I just want to recommend that if you are collaborating with another organization for a specific program and you want to pitch this idea to a funder, just make sure that you have very clear roles for each of the organizations. And that's going to help you to actually implement the program, but also how you communicate about the program to the funder. And then there was another question about organizational growth. So growing your work, I'm going to recommend that you start with your current funders. So talking to them about your plans for growth and let them know about this exciting change that you have, and also use that in your search method too, as I mentioned, your research. So start to kind of think about funders, maybe even nationwide funders that could be interested in supporting your growth and expansion of your program or new programs for increasing your impact. So those are my kind of big proposal success tips. I'm going to go to the last slide here. Are there any other questions, Emma, that we have and that we have some time to cover?
Yes, there are. So clarification on the previous question I had asked you.
Okay.
They were looking for grant application metrics. So showing what they have done as a grant writer so that the board sees the effort that goes into prospecting, application denial, the 30% application. So tracking one's own time and effort. Do you have any good strategies there?
Yes, that's a really great question. Well, it depends on how much time you have. I'm going to say that yes, communicating that kind of information with your board is certainly a priority, but I would really try to very simply communicate with them about weekly or monthly time you're dedicating to seeking funders. And then the time that it actually takes to research one funder and then actually submit a proposal. And what you can do as well is that will help you kind of assess where you're at right now. And then you can start a conversation with your board about where you want to be, 6 months from now, a year from now, and also thinking about, the amount that you're asking for each of these grants. Maybe it's that you find that you're planning to submit quite a few grants at $5,000 each, but you want to start to transition to having maybe a few more funders that can give you some of those larger grants, like a $20,000 grant that will help you, both to support your work, but also spend a little less time at submitting these applications.
Awesome. I just want to clarify 2 things. So we know that there have been some issues accessing the FDO link. We are looking into why that is an issue, and we will be sending out a follow-up email after this training. And so we will fix the link in that sent out email. I'm sorry if that caused any unnecessary frustration for people, but we're definitely looking into it, and we will figure out why it is that isn't working. And then the second thing I wanted to add is, if you joined us late, can you please add your name and the name of your organization or school so we can get a good idea of who was with us today? I'm going to ask you another question, Jessica, if that sounds all right.
Yeah.
Any tips to handle the funders who state on their website not accepting unsolicited proposals? How do you break through?
Yeah, that's a good question. You're going to want to reach out to them. So whatever type of contact information that they have on their website, whether it's an email or a phone call or a phone number, you're going to want to reach out. And again, you're going to want to have prepared very specific questions based on your research, because they're going to know whether or not you have done your research and want to engage them in a conversation about your work. That would be my biggest recommendation there.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
If your organization doesn't have the capacity to do rigorous program evaluation to determine impact in a focus area, for example, this program might have benefits for social emotional learning, but you don't have the capacity to evaluate this impact. But you are able to evaluate a different impact, say math scores, would you still include SEL benefits in your grant application?
Yes, I would. And what I would do there is actually try to understand what research has already been done and produced, either locally or nationally, on SEL that's related to your program impact. So you can call out research studies that have shown the type of impact and just say that this is, essentially what you are aiming for in your project, is that because you are implementing this program, you are anticipate these SEL metrics or SEL impact achieved. And on that topic of SEL, funders do understand that that's a very challenging thing to assess. So just keep that in mind.
Excellent. I think on that note, it doesn't seem like there's any more big questions in the chat that I have seen. So I think we can start to wrap up. I would love to address what's on the screen right now. So there will be a follow-up Q&A session with Jessica on May 8th. The link for that will be sent out shortly. Please come with your questions. We will unmute and have people's videos on so that you have the opportunity to chat with her about questions that are still lingering. She is also generously offering 10 sessions of free sessions for grant review. So we will be sending out the link to her calendar so that you can take some time and really get Jessica's one-on-one knowledge to use with your organization. And then we will also be sending out a short survey as well as materials. So please offer us feedback. We would love to know what you thought of today's training as we continue to offer more in the future. Anything to add, Jessica?
No, I'm just going to say thank you all so much for coming to join us today, and thank you for your questions. And we're looking forward to the follow-up session.
Wonderful. Thank you all for being with us today. We really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you.